Does it look like that would be likely? Because, like you said, we just started Ramadan. President Biden has called for a temporary 6-week ceasefire in exchange for the release of hostages, also aid to get into Gaza. Does it look like that ceasefire is going to happen at all?
Look, I think what we're hearing is that the Hamas leadership is not interested right now. Sinwar has said that he has the Israelis right where they want them, which is a strange thing to say when you've lost, 80, 90% of the Gaza Strip. But I think he somehow believes that he may be able to ignite the West Bank, Jerusalem, or maybe even the broader Arab world against Israel during Ramadan. He thinks he can play off of the kind of religious tensions that typically accompany this time of year. That's the complexity as we understand it. I mean, from the Israeli perspective, there are some additional challenges. There were actually reports this morning that one of the hostages that was believed to be alive has now been declared dead. The news is just growing more and more pessimistic about the fate of these hostages. The Israelis are aware that for every day they wait, for every day they don't try to go in and pull them out, that's another day where you have the potential for things to go badly for these hostages who've been held largely underground for the last 5 months under terrible conditions.
I want to get back to that city of Rafah. President Biden, in an interview on MSNBC over the weekend, called an Israeli invasion into Rafah a red line for him. What are your thoughts on those comments?
I have to say, this has been a weird week when it comes to watching this conflict. Because if you recall, the president he flew over to Israel. He provided military advisors to the Israelis to try to help them figure out how to handle the problem of Hamas. He continues to call for the release of the hostages, and Hamas refuses to do so. And yet what he's doing right now is slamming the Israelis for wanting to finish the war that they didn't start, but that they want to finish. And this seems inextricably tied to our election cycle. We saw the president take some pretty clear and somewhat harsh positions as it related to Israel during the State of the Union address last week. We've seen leaks coming out of the White House where they're talking about how Benjamin Netanyahu, that right now his tenure as prime minister, is in danger. It's not to say that that isn't true. I think the Israeli prime minister's tenure has been in danger since 10/7, since that catastrophic intelligence failure. But what's interesting is that the White House is leaking this stuff in the first place. And it really does look like because Israel is not maybe as popular among some constituents within the Democratic Party, the progressives to say the least, maybe also, Michigan voters, and we know that Michigan's going to be a tough battle for the president. It appears that President Biden has taken on some very different rhetoric, really critical of Israel because of electoral considerations. I have to say this is not a great look for the United States. It appears that we're meddling in the affairs of a Democratic ally. I don't think we should be doing that. But then on top of that, the idea that our electoral considerations would begin to bear out in the Middle East as it relates to handling a terrorist organization and defeating a terrorist organization that's designated here in the U.S. I mean, it's not as if the Israelis are the ones saying, well, this is a terror group. We say it too. And you'd think that we'd want to wrap this up. And by the way, we'd also probably want to go after the patrons and sponsors of Hamas and to hold them to account. And here I'm talking about the Iranians primarily, but also the Qataris, the Turks. We haven't seen the president say one thing about any of these countries. Instead, we're hearing that Israel is about to cross a red line. So we're certainly watching some strange headlines, to put it mildly.